Thanks, Brad. Appreciate it. We've got a really big group joining us tonight. It's exciting. This is a meeting that I've been wanting and wishing for 3 or 4 years. So fun to do it finally. And thank you to Ken-ichi and Cynthia. Um, we bow our heads to both of you. You guys really are hugely important in the natural history community and to what we do. So we're going to go through some questions that I've sort of somewhat pre-vetted to the two speakers. And then after 30 to 40 minutes of that, we'll open it up to anybody that wants to ask a follow-up or a new question. If you could write those questions into the chat, we'll pick sort of a cross-section of those, depending on how many we have. And those will be our questions toward the latter portion of this evening. And let's start off with just getting to know the two of you a little bit more. I think a good question always to start folks like Ken-ichi and Cynthia are how you got started. Did you like bugs and play in the dirt like a child and kind of grow up from there, and then this just kind of caught up to you, or did you come about this from some other direction? So and whichever one wants to go first, tell us a little bit about how you got interested in all of this and nature in particular.
Ken-ichi, do you want to go first?
Sure. I don't love answering this question, but I do love asking this question. I totally love hearing from all iNat users, because everyone has their own path, although there's definitely like trends and how people get into this kind of practice. I'm one of those people who's just I've been at it lifelong. It's intrinsic to me and I can't get rid of it. So one of my first memories is actually my dad taking me to visit my newborn brother in the hospital. My brother's 3 years younger than I am. And I am ashamed to admit I have absolutely no recollection of actually meeting my brother for the first time, but I have a distinct recollection of the fish in the fish tank at the flower store that my dad brought us to before we went to the hospital. So other organisms have always been the thing that like most catch my eye, and they're the key to all my memories, and they're always what I'm paying attention to in the world.
That's great. I also don't remember meeting my little sister for the first time, nor do I remember a flower shop or any fish. I think I'm really passionate about data and accurate, good data, and I love being outside also, although as a kid, my family didn't do a lot of that. I had a friend in high school whose family did take me hiking and camping and backpacking and all that stuff, but that wasn't the culture that I grew up in. And I came into this, I'm a geographer, so I have my MS in GIS, and I came into Calflora from a data perspective and cartography and mapping and more statistical background and interest. And I do love being outside, but that's like one of the benefits of this position.
Very cool. Tell us a little bit about your two organizations. It would probably take an hour to do this, but I'm going to give you about a minute and a half. So just for the one person online that might not be familiar with your organizations, what are they and what do they do, and just kind of what are they all about? And you can go in either order you want.
Well, we at Calflora really love working with iNaturalist, and we collaborate and partner and work together with iNat quite a bit. And Calflora is an aggregator of data from many different sources across the state, plant data only. So iNaturalist, as you know, is not just plants and not just California, but we take what is plants and what is California and what people have allowed from iNaturalist and bring it into Calflora, as well as thousands of other sources. And our kind of signature map or signature data that people look at regularly that I can show you in a little while if you'd like, is the map of California with lots of blue dots showing the distribution of 8,500 species, 8,500 plant species that grow wild in California. And some of those blue dots come from iNaturalist. Some of them come from specimens. Many of them come from Ron Vanderhoff himself with fabulous photos attached. So that's in a nutshell what Calflora is.
A lot more than that, but that's your 90 seconds. Ken-ichi, what's the same?
I've never been good at the elevator pitch, but I think you did a good job. Yeah, iNat is an app on your phone that helps you identify other wild organisms that you encounter in the world. If you can think of, like, if any of you have like a friend who's a biologist, or the person that you're always like, hey, what's this thing? And that's the person you text or email like a photo of the weird bug you saw. iNat is like that person in app form. And it basically consolidates the knowledge of all kinds of people like that all around the world that can help you identify plants and animals around you. So we synthesize some of that knowledge using machine learning to create like automated immediate identifications, but there's also lots of actual humans all around the world that can see the photos that you take with the iNat app and help you identify the plant that you saw.
Excellent. And you can see a lot of dots on a map on that one too, if you're
You
into
like
it.
dots on maps. We've got you covered.
Exactly. Okay, let's go back in your memories and your histories and tell us a little bit about kind of the origins of each of your platforms. Back when technology was a little different and people were a little less gray, and yeah.
Go ahead, Ken-ichi.
I think when Calflora got started, I was 13. A while ago. Yeah, I'll give the iNat origin story in a nutshell. So I'm one of the co-founders of iNats, and yeah, I came up with it because I grew up in New England, and I moved to California in 2003, right after college, without a plan or a job. And I'd always been into nature, and California is ecologically quite a bit different than where I grew up in New England. Y'all have different trees, or we have different trees. We have different birds. So when I moved here, it was a big nature learning experience for me. And at the time, you know, I was a young adult, and the media world was different than when I learned about nature in New England as a small child. Still had books and field guides, but I also had the internet and the digital camera and tons of other people on the internet who shared my interests. And so if I could post a picture to a blog or an early social media site, and just random strangers around the world would comment on it and help me figure out what things were. So it occurred to me, like it occurred to many other people at the same time, that there should be a site for people like that to do this kind of thing. A dedicated venue for sharing this kind of information with each other so that we can all learn more about nature and appreciate it more. So that's where iNat came out of. I started working on it at the UC Berkeley School of Information because I was struggling to motivate myself to actually do it because I'm very lazy, and I figured going back to school and going into debt would be a good motivator for actually building this thing. So I did that, and I worked on it with Nate Agrin and Jess Klein, my fellow students at the School of Information at Cal, and we launched the first version of it in 2008. And since then, I met Scott Laurie, who's iNat's current executive director, in 2009, and we collaborated for many years. Many of them at the California Academy of Sciences, where we were kind of incubated for most of the 2010s. Until about a year ago, when we spread our wings and started our own nonprofit. So iNat is now an independent 501c3 in the United States and California.
And Calflora became a 501c3 in the year 2000. And Ann Dennis, I was also probably a little older than 13. But Ann Dennis was the executive director then. And she and Tony Morosco created a list of plants that they knew of that grew somewhere in California. And that was the origin of Calflora. And then I became the GIS project manager. GIS stands for Geographic Information Science in 2014. And then the executive director in 2017. And Calflora has been growing and blossoming ever since. And with this short list of plants that Ann Dennis had back in the year 2000 when she started the 501c3 nonprofit called Calflora. That's grown into 8,500 species, so all wild plant species that grow in California.
Doesn't the database date back to the 90s though?
Like before the 501c3 status, maybe
Yeah.
98, late 90s.
Okay.
I don't know the exact date for that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, we talked about a lot of similarities, dots on a map, but beyond that, how are some of the ways that Calflora and iNaturalist differ? I don't think they compete with each other. I think they complement each other in most ways. Maybe you could expound on that a little bit and some of the distinctions between the two, so that when our audience is deciding, well, where do I go to do something? What might you recommend?
Do you want to start on that?
Yeah, sure. There's a lot of differences. So iNat is global and it is for all species. So whether you're in your backyard in Orange County or whether you are traveling in Namibia, you can use iNat to observe anything that's alive. Whereas Calflora is more focused on plants in California. And some of the implications of that are that iNat is fairly generic, like we can never be that perfect for any one place. Californian botanists will probably always have a problem with some plant name that they find on iNat because we have a global perspective and a global mandate. So we try to, localize things as much as we can, but sometimes, we have one taxonomic system, so it serves the entire world. I'd say iNat is a little bit more focused on the generic user, although I'm always fighting against that notion. I'd say Seek, which is another app that we produce, is sort of the app we try to make it for as many people as possible. It's meant to be very easy to use and accessible for the largest number of people. And I would, Cynthia, maybe you'd agree with me that Calflora is mostly focused on people who are very focused on plants in California.
Yes, absolutely. That's the bigger difference between the two organizations. Just plants, just California. And Calflora really benefits from iNat data. So we have a filter and we pull in, heavily filtered from our algorithm iNat data into Calflora. And I think that creates what Ken-ichi recently called a sense of completeness. Like when you look at the distribution for a plant in the state of California, having the iNat data included in there, as well as all these other sources all together in one place, federal organizations, state parks, county parks, like lots of coming all together to aggregate in one place. I'd say that's a big difference in terms of how we function on a day-to-day basis. I don't know. I haven't been part of iNat. I don't know exactly how they function every day. We kind of do a stand-up, like who's doing what today. Probably, too many meetings, but that's how things go. And yeah, I don't know much about what you do every day, Ken-ichi. Do you have too many meetings also?
I think I've weeded a lot of them out of my life. So I've had periods in my professional life when I had too many meetings, but these days I'm pretty good.
That's good.
I would say one other significant difference is that Calflora is primarily a data repository, a very, very useful one. And iNat is more of a service that we provide to end users to help them record information for their own uses, but also to slow you down and help you appreciate nature and help you connect with other naturalists who can help you learn about things. And as a result, data on iNat is a little more iffy than data on Calflora. There's a lot more questionable records that you can help fix, but there's also a little bit more slop on iNat in terms of data quality. So oftentimes, if the way that I use Calflora as an iNat user as well, is I'll refer to it and say like, well, is this plant really here? Are there herbarium records of this plant in this place? How does that compare with this record that I found on iNat, which is claiming that this plant, which seems way out of range, is in this place?
Let me follow up on that. I wasn't planning on this one, but you're talking about data quality and accuracy. Just quickly, how can a user in both your platforms improve that data accuracy?
Go for it, Cynthia.
That's a great question. There's a lot of ways to improve accuracy. I'd say the most common and perhaps most effective way on the Calflora platform is if you see something that could be erroneous, to comment on it. And we don't allow anonymous comments, so you do need to sign in and be registered with Calflora to leave a comment. And then the person whose observation it is receives an email, and it says, Cynthia Powell is wondering about, this photo doesn't look like it matches the species, or the location is very disjunct. Can you please check it? And then if they don't react within a week, then it goes into this category we call questionable, which means that as a default, you can't see the record on Calflora, but you can, in your queries, and Ron, you do this a lot, you can specify, I do actually want to see questionable records, and I want to see all the records, whether they're questionable or not. So you can change your query to see them if you want to. And in terms of accuracy, that's helped. I don't have a number off the top of my head. I don't know how many records that's improved over the years, but lots. And it not only has improved lots of records, but it's also kind of made sure people are accountable for their, yes, I know this is disjunct, like Keir Morris and David Magny recently had received a comment, and they said, yes, I know this seems wildly far away than where it usually grows, and it is, and we were very surprised, and we submitted it, and we got DNA tested and herbarium, we went through all the steps, and we're sure that this is what it is. And that was, then the user said, thank you, I didn't know that it grew there, and that's really good to know. So accuracy is really important. You're probably not ever going to reach a point where everything is 100% accurate, but always striving toward that goal.
Yeah, no collection of data, including a museum collection, is 100% accurate. Never achievable. So iNat is a little bit different. If you find something that looks wrong to you, the main way that you can act to correct it is to add your own identification. So that's probably the most common thing. You find a photo on iNat and you're like, this person says that it's Castanea foliosa, but I know that it's not. It's Castanea latifolia or something like that. And the way you can correct that is to add your own ID. So you can, for any observation on the site, you can say, I think it's this. And iNat tries to build a consensus ID of all the opinions that people have provided about what an iNat observation is. So if the way I usually describe it is if you find an observation of a dog that says it's a dog, but the photo is clearly showing a cat, you can come in and say it's a cat. And iNat will say, I have one person saying it's a dog and one person saying it's a cat. I don't know who's right, but they both agree that it's a carnivore because that's a group of mammals that contains both dogs and cats. And if 10 more people come in and say definitely cat, then iNat will say, well, there's a clear majority of people who think that it's a cat. So I'm just going to shift over to cat. And that dog person is clearly wrong. That's how most data correction works on iNat. We also have a thing called the data quality assessment on the bottom of every observation, where you can vote on other attributes associated with an observation. So like if the photo seems like correctly identified, but the location seems wildly wrong, you can vote and say like, I think that location looks wrong. And that's just a majority system. So like if a majority of people thinks it looks wrong, then it'll get booted into the casual category. And it'll get removed from all of our default maps.
Very good. Okay, let's switch gears for a second. Talk about the business side, I guess. We all know that nothing is free, and the administration and the services that both of you provide come at a cost. And we also know that each of you now are 501c3s, nonprofits, How do you fund? How were each of your organizations funded?
Yeah. I wish that this was sort of like a conventional thing for all organizations, like that they would have a document saying like, this is where our money comes from.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't do it either. I mean, like nonprofits with the IRS are required to publish their tax return, their 990, and that explains some of it. But I was just looking at our 990 before this meeting, and it's still hard to figure out like where exactly the money is coming from. So I'll say that right now, INAT is primarily funded by the Moore Foundation, the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, based in the Bay Area. Um, but the money that they're providing us right now is basically sort of to get us on our feet as an independent nonprofit. Ideally, we want to be funded by a majority of small dollar donations from users. So just like your favorite public media station, we would love it if everyone gave us $5 a month, signed up as a regular donor. That helps us extraordinarily. That kind of regular donation helps us plan financially. And honestly, to some extent, you are accountable to who pays your bills, and we want to be accountable to you, our users. That's really important to us. So that would be the best way for us to be funded long term. But we know that that'll probably never cover all of our expenses. So we're anticipating having a mix of revenues, including small dollar donations, large dollar donations from people who can afford it, and grants as well mixed in there.
Calflora is funded over 40% of our budget comes from private donations from people like you. Thank you as you support Calflora. Monthly donations, annually, whatever works for you. And we get some funding from, we have a invasive plant software called Weed Manager that is a subscription-based software. So if you want to use it, there's a subscription you pay. So some of our funding comes from that. But our biggest, the biggest slice of the pie is personal donations. So thank you for supporting Calflora and continuing to support Calflora. CNPS chapters support Calflora. Organizations support Calflora, and people like individual one by one support Calflora too.
Since I always do a bad job of this, Cynthia, how can people donate to Calflora right now?
That was a setup.
Asking, Ken-ichi. Well, since you asked, we have a support page that you can see from our homepage, and I am going to put it in the chat.
How convenient.
Yeah, and it even includes things like not just support Calflora now or set up monthly, but there's IRA donations, there's corporate matching, there's planned giving. So if you're working on your will or trust, let's say X% goes to these nonprofits that I love, and gifts of stock. So those are other ways that you can donate to Calflora.
All great ways to give. The INAT equivalent is iNaturalist.org/donate. It's also at the bottom of every page of our website, and all of our apps have a donate section as well, if that's how you use INAT.
Excellent. I would just encourage everybody, if you're using the platforms, you need to pay a little bit for the platforms too. So do your best. Okay, back to the platforms. How has or how is in the future AI and computer learning, how is that changing your platforms and how people interact with nature and data collection and all of the above? Seems like AI is having a influence on everybody.
Go ahead, Ken-ichi.
I mean, it was hugely pivotal for us. So INAT started in 2008 before the current AI revolution. And for many years, I would watch people use the app for the first time, and they would take a picture of a plant and they would upload it, and they would say, now what? Is that it? Like, when do I get my answer? And I would tell them, if and when someone decides to help you out, that's when the magic happens. And they're like, but that's not now. And I'm like, probably not. Probably maybe today, maybe in a week, and maybe never. And when people would ask about it, I would say like, yeah, the technology to identify a plant in an image is 20 years off. Like that's not happening anytime soon. And then the next year, Alex, my coworker, was like, guys, I think I can do that. And he built our first version of our automated suggestions, or our AI suggestions, as a lot of people call them. And his first version was just for lady beetles in California, and he built an early version of our system that was like, it's like 95% accurate on lady beetles. And he's like, see, it's really good. And we're like, 95, that's crazy good. So we built that into our apps, and it's really become a defining feature for all of iNet. It's the reason that many people come to it. It's the way that Seek works. So Seek is basically that plus a game. It provides automated identifications for whatever you're pointing your phone at. And that's all the same kind of technology that is behind many of today's AI tools. I actually describe it as machine learning instead of artificial intelligence, because it's not intelligent. It's better to think about these tools as a very sophisticated version of autocomplete. And that's basically what iNet's identifications are too. You feed it an image that it's seen something like it many, many times, and it's not magic. It's just math trained on the identifications of hundreds of thousands of people using iNet over the years. So our system is really, it's a distillation of human expertise. It's every time you use it, you're being helped by other people who have added labor to our system over many years, and we try to credit them. So every time you add an identification, if you haven't noticed it, at the bottom of the suggestions, we usually say, these suggestions are powered by observations and identifications by Ken-ichi and Cynthia and Ron, because we know who the top observers and identifiers are for the taxa that are being suggested to you. So we try to list those people out to make it clear that this is really people powered.
Great.
Yeah, that's a good point, Ken-ichi, about machine learning, calling it machine learning instead of AI, or in addition to, if you wanted to add that in. Calflora has implemented some machine learning. When you are editing your observations in Calflora, you can ask the system, PlantNet, what do you think this is? And it's to the genus level, I don't know, 80–90%, species level, maybe a little less. And maybe we'll build that out. Maybe we'll put that into our app. People do expect it in the app. Our phone app is called Observer Pro, and we originally built it as part of our weed manager software. So it's basically land managers in the field looking at weeds that they know well and documenting where the polygon is, and how it's changed over time, creating history stacks to show change over time. So our app was not originally built for people, just like everyday users out in the field trying to figure out what a plant is. But that's not to say it couldn't or shouldn't do that as well. But we're not doing that at this point.
Okay. Personal questions for each of you. I have to read my question. Hold on. Okay, so as naturalists yourself, and as people who love nature, as you've already explained, not as programmers or managers or executives, what are you the most proud of with your organization? What's the thing that makes you feel all happy about what you've done and how you invested the last many years of your professional life?
That's a great question. I have to say, well, first of all, can you see me on the video when I'm talking? Because my video is on, but I cannot see myself.
Let's see you.
Yeah, I see you.
Okay, you see, good.
Yep, some people will have to just pin you guys if they want to see you.
Okay, that's fine. As long as you can see me, I don't need to see myself. I don't want to make sure I was working. Okay. I'm really proud of my team, and I think that our communication has improved over time, and we've gotten through some big hurdles together, and we know each other's personalities, and we work well together, and I'm really happy about that. It makes me, I'm not someone who dreads going to work, like, oh God, another day. I try and spend more time outside leading excursions. Time behind a computer is very important for my job. but just working together with a group of people who I appreciate their work. I think they do great, excellent, amazing work. Well, and if I don't think so, then I I do say that as important part of the job is to set clear expectations and let people know if you're not quite satisfied. And so that's something that I'm really proud of, that we have a great team and we have maintained communication and worked together well to have built Calflora to be what it is now.
I guess I get the most satisfaction when I hear from users that iNat helped them do something or learn something, or even better if they had no prior interest in nature and they were just sort of like, oh yeah, that's just how I got into it. That was kind of always one of my goals, was to try to infect people with this weird disease that I have. And I'm not sure how much it works. I think for the most part, iNet preaches to the choir, and it's a useful networking tool for people with a pre-existing interest in nature. I'm not sure how much it proselytizes, but it does a little bit. And when I hear those kind of stories, that makes me feel pretty good.
I think whatever drug you're selling is working pretty good. So for Cynthia, I have a question for you. You mentioned you do field trips and things like that, excursions. Talk about that for a minute and tell us about maybe one that stands out, that kind of a fun excursion or a fun trip that you've done with Calflora people.
Yeah, sure. If you'd like to be included on invitations to Calflora plant excursions, Ron and I are actually leading one November 3rd coming up here in Orange County. If you'd like to sign up, go to calflora.org, and in the upper right, you can register to with Calflora, and then I'll send you an email saying, hey, here's more information. And if you want to receive more information about excursions, you can do so that way. So calflora.org, upper corner, register. And Calflora excursions they're diverse. They're all over the state, lots of different kinds of people. Whoever signs up to be informed about them can come on an excursion. Some are long and arduous, some are short, and we barely leave the parking lot. And Ron is on the Calflora board, and we have we have an incredible board, and I feel very supported by them. And another person, Mona Robeson, and I led a hike this past summer in the Eldorado National Forest. And they have strict rules on how many people are allowed to come in the forest. So we had a group of 8, and it's a small number. And it was so hard. We wanted to see the Potamogean in the lake, which was 3 miles in. So we had to get there first. And I was like, you guys, it's like been an hour and we haven't gotten very far. They were so interested in every plant with every step. And then I was just, oh, we might not make it. But anyway, we did make it. And we went swimming in the lake. I brought an underwater camera. We took photos of the Potamogean, and it's doing very well, thriving. And then hiked back, which of course is quicker than the way in was. And it was very special. And I think every group has its own dynamics, and every group is special and unique in its own way. And that was, Mona knew every plant. She was really worried somebody might ask her, what's this plant? She wouldn't have an answer. I'm like, Mona, it's okay. You don't have to know every single plant. But it was recent, so it's one that's on my mind. And it was a lot of fun, and doing these hikes with coworkers or board members makes them even more fun and exciting, and I think satisfying.
All right, I have a question for Ken-ichi then. And while we're doing this, by the way, if you have questions that you want to ask in just a few more minutes, we'll open it up to all of you and you can ask a question. But do type the question now or soon into the chat so we can pick those out. So for Ken-ichi, you're kind of modest, but you're a very good naturalist and biologist yourself. And if nothing else, you have 52,000 observations on iNaturalist, and you have 19,000 of California plants alone. You've been a lot of places, you've seen a lot of things. Do you have any favorite plants or favorite places in California?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite place in California is Mount Diablo. It's the kind of the heart of the East Bay, which is where I live. I live in Oakland, but I get out to Mount Diablo many times a year, and it's a wonderfully botanically diverse place. And I've never had a bad day there. Every time I go there, I see something that is either new to me or, is restoratively familiar to me. You know, it's just one of my favorite places, and I love going there. So I know everyone knows about Mount Diablo. It's probably one of the most botanized locations in all of California. Um, Very well known, but it's special to me. And in terms of plants, I mean, I love so many things, but I do love parasitic plants. Every time I find
Hmm.
a banky or something, that's always really cool.
Hmm.
Um, I've been trying to learn about sedges, but it's slow going.
Wow. Yeah, that's torture.
Grasses are torture for me. Sedges somehow are sort of like, I can maybe do this. I have a little bit of hope.
Uh, okay, well, let's into the nitty-gritty. What's one tip or trick or sort of underused feature maybe, or just something that you want to tell the audience about that, gee, you guys ought to know about this, uh, that iNaturalist or Calflora can do?
Ken-ichi?
Oh, so many. iNet is just like a weird, like eccentric person's workshop of experiments that have gotten forgotten about and weird little fiddly things that seemed useful at one time, but then got forgotten about as well. Um, and there's plenty of them. The thing that I think, well, I should say, if you really like adding identifications and you've never found the identify tool, which is in the header of the website, it's a much more efficient way of adding identifications to a lot of observations at once. So oftentimes we hear from people who are like, oh man, once I found that thing, I could really grind through a lot of IDs and that would really help me out. So if you don't know about identify, a useful tool. Uh, I also wanted to call out that a lot of people don't find the search button in the header of the website. And certainly very few people know that you can activate it by hitting the / key on your keyboard. So it's a really useful way of navigating around. You can hit / and then type in the name of a species and go directly to observations of that species. Um, Bonus, you can do / to get in there, use the arrow keys to go down to the thing that you wanted to search for, and then you can hit command return or control return to go to like the taxon page instead of the observation search. There's a bunch of weird hidden keyboard shortcuts in there that I use a lot, and maybe I just built for myself, but you can
Wow.
do.
All right, those are good ones. Cynthia,
And
anything, any secrets?
well, one thing we were talking about at the beginning of this meeting, I think before everybody was on the call, maybe it was right when we started, was email alerts. And someone was asking, how can I be informed when my iNaturalist observations show up in Calflora? And so I'm not going to, take too long to go over how to set that up right now, but you can just Google Calflora email alerts, use your iNat handle as observer in Calflora, and then see if you have any of your observations in Calflora yet. And if you don't, check your Creative Commons license, because we cannot take your stuff, pull it into Calflora without your permission. So you just change your license. So we'll be able to get it. Also, we don't take it if it's not research grade, if it's cultivated, we have all these filters that there could be other reasons why we don't get it. So, and probably 90% of users, Calflora users, use about 10% of the website, which maybe that's fine. I kind of wonder this every day. Maybe that's fine. They're getting what they need, they're getting what they want, they're finding the information they're looking for. There's, I don't know, 80-90% of the web, we can see our traffic and we're tracking stats to see who's doing what. And so lots of the website is not used as much, is not used as commonly. Maybe it's not as useful, maybe it's not what you're looking for. But if you're just wondering, can Calflora do that? Like, how do you create a history stack? Just Google it and it'll take you to either our website, or we also have a YouTube channel with lots of tutorials. And if you want to, you can also just peruse the YouTube channel and look at our tutorials, and you'll probably be wowed, because I'm wowed myself. Oh yeah, I forgot forgot you could do that. That's pretty cool. And also just things that you might not even occur to you that you want or need, then you might find it, be like, oh yeah, in addition to email alerts, I really need to know X, Y, and Z and be able to figure it out in Calflora.
I love that you can filter Calflora plant lists by blooming month and by habitat type and by annual perennial. It really helps me filter things down.
Oh, great.
Okay, we've got a blend of people listening tonight. We've got a lot of citizen scientists and just armchair enthusiasts, a lot of people like plants. But I imagine we've got a few sort of professionals that work in the trade, land managers and biologists and botanists and such, agency people maybe. What are some ways that you feel proud that your platforms have and are continuing to aid science, real research?
Ken-ichi?
I always struggle with this because like it's really hard for me to keep specific. Like if I were a good outreach person for iNat, I would have my bullet points and I would have these are the 3 research topics that I always want to talk about. I can never remember any of them. So like the one thing that I thought of before this meeting was John Redmond's work with the San Diego County Plant Atlas. I think it's really cool that they basically kind of built a nice hybrid flora effort between professional curation by John and the botanists at the Nat and volunteer contributors who contribute through iNat and through Calflora and through other venues to create a really robust flora for that county. I think that's a really cool use of iNat, and I know that John is like an obsessive iNat identifier, and the way that he uses it is like he's like accepts all observations, but he only cares about his own identification, which means that he obsessively identifies lots and lots of stuff in San Diego County. And when they pull in data from iNat, they pull in his identification, and that's what it is.
Yeah.
So the question is, what are we particularly proud of? Is that right, Ron?
Oh, you can interpret it any way. What are you proud of, or what are some of the uses for professional users?
Research.
Either way, research.
Sometimes researchers will write to us or write to Calflora support and say, I'm doing research on this thing and I want to use Calflora data like this. And we say, oh, great, here's some tips, might help you. Will you please let us know, send us your publication or let us know what you find out, because we're curious too. And I think it's a big fat 0% return on that request. So of course you can look in Google Scholar and see where Calflora is cited, which is quite a bit, and kind of read the Madronio and see what people are doing. But the one thing that was someone was working on was phenology, and not all Calflora observations or iNat observations or specimen data, like they don't all include phenology, but when they do, they were seeing if climate change had affected the flowering period and over time, and maybe it was in a certain part of California, maybe not the whole state. I think that's really interesting, and I'm pleased and surprised to hear about all the creative ways people use Calflora data, and when you can export by shapefile, by KML, by CSV, Excel, all the different formats, GeoJSON, JSON, and so when people have questions about exporting, then sometimes we hear about the research, or if we look at Google Scholar, but usually we don't hear about it. So if you are using Calflora data for research, just know that we would love to hear about it. And thanks for telling us. It's always interesting.
One thing that we often ask researchers to do is to get, if they're going to use iNat data, get the data from GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, because when you export data from GBIF, you can get a citable document object identifier, and that really helps us find your publication when you publish, and we can say like, oh, this person used iNat data, and we can communicate that to donors, but also observers.
Yeah.
And say like, hey, this data really had purpose scientifically. I often also hear from scientists who don't use iNet data in that way. They use it kind of like as advanced scouting, and they'll use it for research to find where they want to go and do further collecting if they're interested in doing field work. So they might not even be interested in using the data, but they use it to say like, this place looks cool. I'm not seeing exactly the species that I want, but I'm seeing lots of associates, and this is probably going to be a good place to focus my time.
Right. I'll get my last question, then we'll open it up for some really good questions from the audience. So each of you invested a lot of your life in your platforms and in connecting people to nature. What's your personal dream, not your iNaturalist or Calflora dream, but what do you hope for the next generation of naturalists?
Ken-ichi.
Another way to say it is when you win the Nobel Prize and you're giving your acceptance speech, what will be your dream for the next people that follow you?
I always have trouble with this. I don't presume to have anything special to say to people who are younger than I am. I don't feel like I've gained any special wisdom through my experiences or through my age. I feel like I don't have much to say on that point. I hope. I can't tell the people what to do, but I hope that they share my own kind of fascination with other organisms. And, it's really an article of faith for me that other organisms are interesting and have value. It's not utilitarian. It's just something that I believe. And I think that many people before me have believed the same things. If you read the writings of 19th century naturalists or even people further back in history, if you look at traditional ecological knowledge, like people have always had that kind of faith in the value of other organisms. So my only hope for the future is that that continues and that people don't lose that.
Yeah,
Well said.
that's a great point. And curiosity, like Ken-ichi mentioned, if you're curious and continue to be curious and learn more, then that's great. And if you can use Calflora, wonderful. And good luck tackling climate change and trying to do something about it. And I'm really sorry.
Hey,
Sorry
we're
for climate
we're suffering
change.
through it too, Cynthia. Not like we're missing it.
Okay, well, you guys have been great. Now let's open it up. We've got people have been writing questions in the chat. And I think, Sunny, I think you've been kind of perusing those. And
That's right. Yeah, I have been perusing. There haven't been that many, so reminder to everybody, if you have a question, please submit it in the chat. So I did message Amy Malone, and she had a question, and she's asking, so far, iNaturalist has preferred not to use the term AI. Do you think all the more recent buzz about AI will make you more likely to call it AI, or how might it influence people's feelings about your computer vision machine learning?
So I'm a cranky old nerd, and I'm probably the only one who still is like doesn't love using the word AI. It's endemic. We can't get rid of it. It's just how people refer to the technology. So it's fine. You can call it AI. We call it AI internally. The new app has by default, like a Seek-like camera experience where when you're taking a photo of something in the field, it's going to be recommending what it does. You can try this right now. It's in the App Store. It'll be recommending like what species it thinks is in the photo, and we call that thing the AI camera. It's fine. I don't think people are savvy enough to know that it's not really intelligent. It's just means fancy autocomplete. That's all.
Perfect. Thank you. We have another question from Elizabeth Lockhart. Would you like to ask your question? Do you want me to read it out?
Hello, this is Elizabeth. I can ask it.
Yay!
So yeah, my question is how to distinguish between when I should upload observations to iNaturalist versus Calflora. I used to sort of do the more rare or unusual ones on Calflora because I thought maybe less people would see them. They would be hidden more, which isn't necessarily true. But then I saw that a lot of them had already been uploaded from iNaturalist to Calflora. So then I thought, well, that makes no sense for me to duplicate it and add another observation when it's already there. It gets a little bit confusing for me as a community scientist who's very much an amateur. So I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Well, from the Calflora perspective, duplicates are not a problem. So if you add something to iNat and to Calflora and it ends up coming into Calflora from iNat, that's totally fine. And if you are concerned about rare plants, you can obscure the location on both platforms. We have a different way of obscuring. Well, I guess anyway, Ken-ichi can talk about how iNat does the obscuring. In Calflora, we don't do top-down obscuring, so you as the observer decide if you want to obscure the location or not. And, you know, of course, at Calflora, we would actually love it if you just added your observations to Calflora, and that would be great. And that way we can use your photos as reference photos, which we cannot do with iNat photos at this point. But if you prefer to use iNat, that's fine. And you can just hope that your observations make it over. And if they don't, you can hand pull them over later yourself, except for the rare plant. So we don't get rare plant data from iNat at this point, and that might change in the future. But at this point, if you have a rare plant and you want people to know about it in Calflora, you need to add it to Calflora.
Great, thank you.
Can I add one other thing to that too? If you are just allowing your data to come in, your iNaturalist records to come in, you can still go into Calflora and add additional data on top of that. And I find that really useful, particularly if I'm working with invasive plants or rare plants. And you know, we want to know what the phenology was, or we want to know about the population size, or we want to draw a polygon around that colony or something like that. The things that you can do in Calflora complement what you've already started in iNaturalist. So keep that in mind too.
Is there a way to link my handle with my Calflora account, my iNat handle? Because it's different.
Yeah, it's different. And you can't actually edit your iNat observations in Calflora because that would create a versioning problem.
Okay.
Maybe that'll be different in the future. But for now, if your observation comes in from iNat, you can't edit it in Calflora.
Okay.
And like Ron was saying, if you want to draw the polygon and add all this extra information in your form, then you can do that in Calflora.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, next question is from Eric Coberly. Eric, do you want to unmute yourself?
Sure thing. Yeah, so my question was regarding iNaturalist. I was curious if there's any way to export observations with photos and location data included. Kind of just thinking of it as like a means to back up your own personal data. I know obviously it's good to store your photos on a separate backup. But if there's a way to link that data with it, that'd be great.
Yeah, this is like a long-term dream of mine that I may never achieve, but no, there's no way to do exactly what you're asking for. You can export all of your observational data, which will include the locations, all of the coordinates, but that doesn't come with the photos. It will come with a photo URL, I think just one. But the only way to do what you're talking about, it would be to build a custom tool that uses our API to both pull down the data and then download the photo records. And that's long been an aspiration of mine, but I've never got around to it.
Awesome. All right. Thank you.
Okay, next question. Elora Camacho, feel free to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. You guys kind of went over data accuracy and how to update that with iNat. I just kind of had a follow-up question about that. I work for an invasive plant control program for the state parks on the river delta outside Sacramento, and we aren't using iNat for our surveying, but there aren't a ton of observations on the delta. So like in remote areas where we're accessing, I've like made it a personal goal to get more observations out there. So far my team's found 2 species that aren't in iNat. And so one allowed me to keep the placeholder, but a different one kept changing it to something else. And like, we're aware that like there are 2 different species. And so it keeps changing it to the one species. So do you guys have, what could I do for that?
So is it changing because other people are identifying it as something else, or because our taxonomy is not supporting the 2 species?
It seems like the taxonomy is not supporting the 2. Because
Yeah.
I didn't see that anyone else had commented on it. I just saw that it was changed.
Yep, that's tough. So this is one of these issues like I was talking about earlier, where iNat has a global perspective and may not support the same taxonomy that is used in a Californian context. The way around it would be to flag the taxon in question. So if you go to the taxon detail page on the website, there's this button halfway down that says curation, and you can choose to flag the taxon and bring the issue to our site curators. And you can explain and say like, hey, I'm a biologist working in the Sacramento River Delta, and iNat doesn't support this split of the species. And for our conservation purposes, it would be really useful if we supported both concepts. So even though iNat is trying to stick to a taxonomic backbone provided by the Plants of the World Online site provided by Kew in London, this is a situation where iNat should diverge from that taxonomy and support these 2 concepts. That may or may not happen. It's up to the iNat curators, but that would be the way that you kind of start that process.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Got it.
And just to touch on that question also, Alora, the taxonomy that iNaturalist uses, so Calflora is not a taxonomic authority, but we do reflect other taxonomic authorities. So recently, and I'll try and put this into the chat if I can find the link, we just incorporated synonyms or alternate names, if we don't want to call them synonyms, because it's not always, it might be lumping, it might be splitting, it's not always one-to-one, including iNat names. So if you're, it doesn't help when the name is changing on your end, but if you're trying to look up what iNat calls a certain thing in Calflora, but Calflora, because Jepson calls it something else, then you can still cross-reference all those together so you can still find it
Okay.
in Calflora.
Okay, I'll definitely look into it.
If you wanted to, think about state parks using Weed Manager. I think it would be a great solution for even more of your problems than you might realize you have.
Yeah, I am simply an intern with them and I've never heard of it. So I'm not sure if they are using it and I'm not aware of it, but I will bring it up to them and see what they say. So thank you.
And I'll paste the Weed Manager link and also this iNaturalist synonym link both into the chat.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And while Cynthia is doing that, James Mickley, feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, everyone. I work closely with Oregon Flora, which is analogous to Calflora for Oregon. And my students often lament that we are not more integrated with Calflora or with, especially iNaturalist. And so I'm wondering, how can we collaborate together better, especially with regards to data, or perhaps in other ways? Like Calflora, we're looking into integrating iNaturalist records, but we've also talked about things like, should we post an observation field on iNaturalist records with the species page on Oregon Flora, or are there other things that we could do? And so, especially for Ken-ichi, but also for Cynthia, what would be great? Like, what would be pie in the sky for you guys?
I think so. I can't remember the name of the person I talked with at Oregon Flora, but do you serve specimens only, or is it more not that it's only specimens, but do you serve specimens, or do you serve specimens and other things?
Specimens, images, and unvouchered observations.
And unvouchered means it's not a specimen?
Or an image, yes.
Yeah, well, Calflora, someone else wrote in the chat, why is, sometimes our observations kind of bleed outside of California, and that's intentional. We do kind of include some near the border. And we are interested in expanding outside of California, you know, maybe as far up as Oregon, the whole state. We don't have funding for that right now, and it's not, you know, it's not like at the front of our to-do list. But just kind of communicating about what's the latest, greatest, being connected, how can we better work together, sharing information. If you want to write your email in the chat, or I can write mine in the chat, I think that would be great.
Sure. Thank you.
Pie in the sky data partner for us is someone who pulls in iNet records using our API. If you know how to do that with authentication so that you can access hidden coordinates via a project, even better. Cynthia and I are working on that for Calflora. But then the ultimate thing for us is for the partner to also expose an API where we can determine what records have been integrated into them, so that we can show a little icon on our observation pages and say like, hey, this observation is in Calflora, or this observation is also in Oregon Flora, or this observation is in Global Biodiversity Information Facility. I think that helps our users see that their observations are having impact outside of iNet and have further reach. And I think that's really cool. But James, it's great to see you. Like, you could always just wing me an email.
Of course, and I just missed most of what you said, so I'll listen to the recording.
Okay, cool.
Perfect. Okay, Jeff Townsend has a question, and I'll read it out. So, for rare species that are known to be poached, as in Dudleya, I'm reluctant to record an ID with precise location. Are my fears justified? And he's asking for a solution or recommendation. And I did, have a chat with him a little bit in the chat, and he was wondering if you could elaborate on the obscuring that happens with the records as well.
Is this a Calflora or an iNat question, or both?
Yes, inclusive or, so both.
Go ahead, Ken-ichi.
Okay. So yeah, my advice on this is always the safest thing is not to post. If you are really concerned about the safety of plant population, don't put it on the internet. Find a different way of sharing that information. Calflora actually provides more tools to make that kind of simpler. I personally use Calflora a lot in collaboration with the East Bay CNPS chapter, and we use Calflora's tools to record things privately with the people in the chapter who are monitoring that data, and it can remain hidden forever, and that doesn't concern me. That's up to the people who are managing that project. iNet's different. iNet is public by default. Our whole raison d'etre is sharing information and making it publicly available. So if you're not comfortable with that, or you think that that somehow puts a plant at risk, it's probably not the right venue. That said, we do obscure the locations for certain records. So you can individually choose to obscure the location for an observation. And what that means is that it will be publicly displayed at a random nearby point, but not the actual point at which you recorded the information. I think we use a 0.2 degree grid cell. So it's a random point within 0.2 degrees latitude and longitude, which is pretty big. So you can apply that individually, and we also automatically apply it for certain species that have conservation statuses. So we've integrated information about the IUCN Red List, about CNPS rare plant statuses. And if a status like that exists and the plant is considered vulnerable, we will obscure it by default with some exceptions. So things like Coast Redwood, that has an IUCN Red List status. There is no need to obscure every location of Coast Redwood. They are in everyone's backyard. So we don't, there's an exception. So curators on iNet can choose to say like, okay, the status exists, but it shouldn't trigger obscuration. This is either unnecessary or in many cases counterproductive to the conservation of the species. Many species that have a status are more threatened by development and habitat destruction than they are by actual poaching. So when we obscure those records, it does a disservice to scientists who really want to use that data and need it to be as precise as possible. And that just makes it much harder to get access to it. So in situations where it seems like that obscuration is unnecessary, I, or really anyone, can start a conversation with other interested parties and say like, hey, does this really need to be obscured? And we can remove the obscuration. So that was a long-winded way of answering, if you feel weird about it, don't post. For Dudleas specifically, I am certainly not an expert in this area. There's a lot of Dudleas around. You don't need iNat or Calflora to find Dudleas. So it kind of depends on the species. If it's a very desirable one, then maybe not. But if it's something like Dudleya farinosa, which is pretty widely distributed. But again, I'm not a botanist or a conservationist.
Those are great points.
Thank
And to follow up on what Ken-ichi was saying in terms of the Calflora East Bay CNPS group, there are administrators, we call them data czars on that group. And so they can decide what should be available to the public on Calflora and what should be only contained within that group for group members to be able to see it. And this group is a great example in a lot of ways, but just in terms of the main person who's looking through all the observations and kind of QA, QC, what can be published. There's obscured. So if you obscure it, the location is obscured by to the quarter quad, which is smaller than the iNat way. But yeah, like Ken-ichi said, also, if you really are worried about it, maybe don't add it to a platform that other people could look at it.
Thank you.
And that is all the questions we have in the chat. I have one, and I apologize if this was already asked, but if you were given $1 billion, what would be the giant pie in the sky for both your platforms that you would want to improve, or what would you like to add to your platforms?
Yeah, we'd like to expand to have more than just California as our purview, and have more. I feel like I'm asking our engineers, our developers every day, and can you please do this, and what about this, and I'm trying to prioritize, and like, well, that was a top priority yesterday, but today it's actually at the bottom because we have this new thing, and their plates are so full that if we had $1 billion, then we could hire the staff that we need to actually be able to do all the things that we want to do and should do and can do to make Calflora an even more useful and better platform than it already is.
There's so many things one could do with $1 billion.
Where to begin?
Well, I had to say $1 billion because I was like, oh, inflation. I don't know if $1 million is $1 million anymore.
Yeah. I think one thing I would do with a lot of money is create an endowment and have some financial security. I'd be interested in a financial structure that supports iNat, but also other similar efforts. There's a lot of other really useful sites out there. We mentioned Bug Guide and Mushroom Observer earlier that are much smaller in scale than iNat, but are very valuable. They provide a lot of useful information and sort of different ways of doing things than iNat does. I would love to see some kind of fund or endowment that could support those kinds of efforts and make sure that they don't wink out because someone forgot to pay a bill, or the maintainers just stop caring about it anymore. Those things are really valuable, and I want to see them persist into the future.
Thank you. And to any philanthropists listening right now, here are your answers.
Write the check.
Yeah.
My colleagues in development are like cursing my name right now. Like, no, that all goes to iNat. Don't talk about others.
Well, I think we're getting about up to our time here. It's been a wonderful evening for me. I hope everybody in the audience has enjoyed it as much as I have. Any final words from either of the two of you before we kind of tell everybody good night? Ken-ichi, Cynthia, thank you for joining us. Anything you'd like to say?
Well, I want to thank you, Ron, for putting this together. I wouldn't have thought of doing this, and I'm really glad you did. And I'm glad that Ken-ichi and I can both be here. And also, Ken-ichi, I think working with you and working with iNaturalist is, it benefits hopefully everybody. It benefits Calflora. We love working with you, and we think it's an incredible platform, and it enhances what Calflora has to offer. So thank you for that too.
Cool. I love using Calflora. I use it all the time. So
Great.
thanks for keeping it going. And yeah, thanks Ron for organizing this. It's been fun, and I'm happy to hang on and answer more questions if people have them. Yeah.
Well, I think it's the testament to the two of you and to everybody on this call that, when it comes to natural science and the environment and plants and organisms, collaboration is the name of the game, and we're not competitive. I mean, we've got kind of Microsoft and Apple sitting here, the two big shots, and everybody's getting along, and we're all collaborating. We want to help each other. We want to get more people out there. We want to have more information shared. And it's just so exciting to see these kinds of conversations. So thank you both for creating those. And as we say goodnight, just a reminder that next month, on the second Thursday of the month, will be Dr. Matt Gilliams from Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, talking about his 20 years of research on Santa Catalina Island and his new book that is almost out, not quite, on the flora of Santa Catalina Island. So join us for that. I think that is going to be maybe live only, but at least we will record it for the people who can't make it to the Irvine location. Thanks all for joining us. Thanks, Ken-ichi. Thanks, Cynthia. Have a happy Halloween, and we'll see you out in the field.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Laura.
Try and make
Bye.
we want next month to be on Zoom too.
Thank you all.
We'll try our best. It'll at least be recorded.
Thanks.
Right, and thank you to Sunny for nothing crashing or breaking, and to Brad.
You can thank the Zoom. You can thank the Zoom servers.
I was nervous when you said 160 people. Something would go wrong.
Did we miss any questions, or we got through them all?
I think we're all done.
Wasn't
I
man
think we're all going
You know,
home.
there was one question where somebody had asked if
Oh.
you were Cynthia, were landscape designers.
Ah,
Or sorry, landscape architects. My bad.
no.
I just sort of thought so. Yes.
All right. If that's everything, then
I think we're all
That's
gone.
everything. I will
Cool.
end the meeting. Thank you all.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you all. Good
Take it
night.
easy.
Good night.